Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shagok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at why Felt, a girl from the slums, was considered to be a worthy candidate for the royal selection. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. Felt, like the lost daughter of the royal family of Ugantia, grew up in the slums of this very kingdom, where misery, poverty, hunger and violence are just a part of everyday life. And this harsh reality was something that Subaru also quickly experienced himself, in a shady alley, encountering even shadier characters. And such a situation is expected in the world of ReZero. But for Subaru, a Japanese high schooler, it was undoubtedly a new and shocking experience. And this stark introduction, this stark contrast between the expectation of going into a fantasy world, full of adventures and full of magic from our own perspective, and then, well, just being offed violently again and again, sets the stage for the dangerous and unpredictable nature of the new fantastical world that Subaru found himself in. And something Subaru would come to understand also, that the world is very, very unforgiving. But that most people can't come back. However, Subaru had his own silver lining. He was able to experience and enjoy the brighter side of the world, thanks to Milia. True, he was still cursed by the return of death magic thing, which forced him to restart at an unknown point after dying, essentially like retrying a failed save game over and over until the stage is cleared and the boss is defeated. But still he lived a relatively comfortable life most of the time, one akin to that of a noble, in financial and, most of the time, physical security. In other words, he had access to good food, a warm bed, time to process his various traumas, and emotional support. And despite the tragedy surrounding him, Subaru's material needs were always met, and he wasn't subjected to the acute suffering of uncertainty and about where the next meal would come from. Instead, he spent his time learning etiquette, courtly manners, and whip training to better serve Emilia. Wait, what? This sharply contrasted Felt's experience and perspective. She had to fight for her survival on the streets, standing her ground as an orphan in a brutal environment. And her world only changed when a magical Insignia chose her, proving her worthiness to become the new ruler of the kingdom. And alongside this recognition came Reinhardt, essentially a walking cheat code, as her ally. And for those unfamiliar with ReZero, Reinhardt is like a level 100 starter Pokémon at the beginning of the game, or the human equivalent of Let Me Solo Her from Elden Ring. Imagine playing laser tag with the BFG from Doom. That's roughly the level of overpowered we're talking about. And he's utterly devoted to Felt because he genuinely believes she's a worthy leader, and sees her selection by this Insignia as a divine endorsement. And Felt's first-hand understanding of the hardship endured by the ordinary people in a harsh, hierarchical system likely also adds to the appeal. And her anarchistic and anti-authoritarian and libertarian personality suggests she would fundamentally reform the institutions that she blames for such suffering. And this brings us to today's topic: how do magical objects, like the insignia that glows in Felt's hand, determine who is worthy to lead an entire kingdom? And why of all people did it deem Felt, with her rebellious and anti-establishment traits, as worthy? And here two key mechanics come to mind for how such an item might function to assess and recognize a person's worthiness to rule. And the first one is a very simple mechanism. The magic simply detects whether someone is of noble blood. And the first thing that I want to talk about here is a very simple mechanism. The magic might simply detect whether someone is of noble blood, and the more noble blood is inside a certain person, then the better the person is suited for ruling. So essentially the item might act as a glorified DNA test, serving only to validate if a person belongs to the ruling class, even if their birthright might have been stripped away from them. And if this is the case, its purpose would be to reinforce the existing power structures and uphold the status quo, ensuring the ruling elite's claim to the authority appears legitimate and immutable. and can be passed down through the generations even when the original bloodline might have lost their connection to their royal status and to their material wealth. And this mechanism would make the insignia a tool of societal control, ensuring that leadership stays within the traditional hierarchy. But I find my second explanation for this mechanism even more interesting, because the magic could simply be an extremely potent form of time magic. In other words, upon contact with a person, it might first assess whether there's a realistic future in which this person could rise to power, and even more importantly, how suitable they are for the role once they are in power. And in this scenario, the time magic would evaluate a person's right to rule on various predefined characteristics and stats, basically of the entire nation. For example, population size, because if 50% of the entire population suddenly vanish, something terribly likely happened. The overall health of the population, food security, per capita GDP, adjusted for purchasing power of course, and other factors might also become a factor in this. And this magic would then calculate whether the nation is likely to develop positively and survive in the long term. And this mechanism would make Feld's case particularly fascinating, because she experienced life as a street child, as an orphan, knows what it is like to be alone and without resources, and has developed a survival of the fittest mentality. But at the same time, her perspective has shifted. She's gone from being a simple rebel who sought to overthrow the powerful as an act of vengeance to someone with an increasingly solidifying worldview, but one still subject to change. She has come to realize that weakness is a sin, like Nehabaraya has, and that there's a reason the rich and powerful hold their position. They are stronger. In other words, Feld's worldview has evolved and could continue to develop even further. She could become someone who understands both the lowest rungs of society through her own first-hand experience and, simultaneously, from the highest point of view, from her current life as a politically significant figure, surrounded by nobles and served and attended by knights. And she possessed not only the strength and number of ordinary people, workers, farmers, artisans and slum dwellers, but also the sheer power embodied by someone like Reinhard, in addition to her very own of course. And this combination of opposites, the nobility and the common folk, could allow her to bridge the gap, not by merging them into basically one, but by synthesizing them in a way that unites the nation. So she could tap into the untapped potential of people like herself and her peers, bringing about meaningful change for the betterment of all. Perhaps this is why Feld is deemed worthy, the magical object which essentially acts as a plot device proclaiming someone as basically one of the good and relevant people or the main characters in the series might be able to foresee the future, or at least a potential way the future could turn out to be, in which Feld's experience shape her leadership, and her upbringing as a street child and her current life as an influential political figure would provide her with a holistic understanding of life's realities, from the ground level to the very pinnacle of the metaphorical social pyramid. And this makes her uniquely positioned to implement reforms and possibly introduce entirely new social structures that the nation might need and benefit greatly from. In other words, time magic would be a fascinating explanation for such a plot device or MacGuffin, especially if they only base their decisions on probabilities and are capable of making very serious mistakes or fatal misjudgments. For instance, Feld's fiery and often impulsive personality could also create immense chaos in the kingdom, especially at the beginning of her reign, and her initial plans might not differ much from causing outright upheaval. So there's also a risk involved, which, at least in my head, I like this idea. Alright, and that's all for this surprisingly in-depth exploration of something that's probably just a plot device rather than a deeply meaningful magical phenomenon with profound lore. Still, I found it interesting to discuss these things in a more general sense. And now it's your turn. What do you think about this topic? Let me know it down in the comment section below. And while you're typing, I say please check out my German channel, my fantasy channel, and if you don't want to listen to my voice or accent, but are still interested in the things I have to say, I have made an AI channel, narrated by almost a woman, where I use AI voiceovers for my videos, and the channels are all linked down in the video description. Also please check out my Patreon if you want to support me beyond just leaving a like or sub, and with that said, I say thank you very much for watching, thanks to my Patreons for supporting this channel, and special thanks to Other, ASK, Bad Guy Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Bezer, Ben C, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 022Ron, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Din Pep, Dragonlord Placido Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feral Shivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch V. Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Lofrazer, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pantum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Cune Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, Diorg Warboss, Rock Ed Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito 27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Zinukai, and Sonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.